The world was never kind to dragons, at least not in the way bedtime tales made them out to be. To grown men and women, dragons were not shining guardians of treasure, nor majestic beings of wisdom, but calamities in flesh, winged disasters capable of torching villages in a single breath. Even the whisper of their presence was enough to turn entire towns into sleepless shadows. Farmers would tighten the ropes of their barns, mothers would hush their children to silence, and men with weather hands would sharpen spears that looked pitifully small against the image of scaled titans. Yet, in one quiet village tucked between whispering forests and looming mountains, there lived a girl who was too young to understand such fear. She was 6, bright-eyed, curious, and prone to wandering where she ought not to. The villagers called her Little Sparrow, for she was as restless as the small birds that flitted along the rooftops. She laughed too easily, questioned too much, and often found wonders in places others saw nothing but dirt and stone. It was precisely this boundless curiosity that set her feet wandering beyond the boundaries her parents warned her about. While other children played within the fences, she often chased butterflies past the hedges, followed rabbits through tall grass, or spoke to flowers as if they were old friends. The adults scolded her endlessly, fearing what lurked in the deep forest, but what could words do against the pull of wonder? A sparrow cage does not stop beating its wings. That morning began like many others. The sky stretched in a pale blue sweep, the sun warmed the cobbled paths, and the forest beckoned her with the rustle of leaves. She had been chasing a white butterfly, delicate and teasing, as it darted further into the woods. Each time she reached for it, it slipped just beyond her grasp, fluttering deeper into shadows. Breathless but determined, the girl pressed on, until she realized the sounds of the village had long faded behind her. She stood at the edge of a clearing. Here, the air smelled different, not of earth and moss, but faintly of smoke. The grass bore strange markings, blackened patches, as though touched by fire. Her small brow furrowed. She bent down to poke the charred soil, her fingers smudging dark against her skin. And then she saw them, scratches along the rocks, deep grooves too sharp to belong to any deer or boar. Something had been here. Something big. Any adult would have turned back at once. But to a 6-year-old, the unknown was not always danger. Sometimes it was only mystery waiting to be solved. She crept further, small feet crunching softly on leaves. The butterfly long forgotten, she followed the strange signs until she heard a sound, soft yet distinct. A whimper, almost like a cry. Curiosity tugged harder. She moved toward the sound, parting ferns with tiny hands, and there it was. Curled awkwardly in the center of the clearing, half hidden by the roots of a great tree, was a creature she had only ever seen in the terrifying sketches of old storybooks. A dragon, or rather, a dragon hatchling. Its body was covered in uneven scales, jagged and dull in places, glistening faintly in others. Small wings twitched against its sides, too weak to lift it from the ground. Smoke curled lazily from its nostrils and its eyes, 2 pools of molten amber, shifted nervously as it let out another pitiful squeak. To any villager, the sight would have been enough to freeze blood, to send them sprinting back to raise the alarm. After all, an awful dragon hatchling was no less dangerous than the full-grown terrors. Perhaps even more so, for a frightened young beast might lash out wildly. But the little girl did not scream. She did not run. Instead, she tilted her head, her lips parting in wonder rather than fear. The creature, with its stubby claws and oversized head, looked more clumsy than menacing. When it tried to stand, its wings flapped uselessly, causing it to trip over its own tail. The sight drew a bubble of laughter from her chest. "Cute," she whispered, the word soft as a secret. The hatchling stilled. Its glowing eyes blinked at her, confused. No human had ever called it such a thing. No human had ever looked at it without fear. For a moment, the two simply stared at one another. The child with her innocent delight, the dragon with its raw, newborn bewilderment. Tentatively, the girl took a step closer. The hatchling hissed, smoke puffing out in warning, but she did not falter. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of bread, left over from her breakfast. She held out with both hands, as though offering treasure. The hatchling sniffed, then with surprising gentleness, snatched a morsel and chewed clumsily. Crumbs stuck to its snout, and it sneezed, releasing a tiny spark that fizzled harmlessly on the ground. The girl clapped her hands, delighted. "You're hungry." Poor thing. Her laughter, her voice, her complete lack of fear. These were unlike anything the hatchling had ever known. Where its instinct expected hostility, it found warmth. Where its body braced for attack, it was met with kindness. Something stirred within its young heart, something unfamiliar yet comforting. Trust. The girl lowered herself onto grass. Sitting cross-legged before the dragon, she began speaking to it as she would to a lost kitten, her tone gentle and full of wonder. She asked the questions it could not answer. "Where's your mama? Why are you all alone? Do you want to be friends?" The hatchling only blinked, tilting its head, but its tail thumped softly against the dirt, as though agreeing. The sun climbed higher, shadows shifting, but the girl remained. She sang a little song, her voice sweet and off-key, while the dragon listened, eyes half closed. For the first time in its short life, it did not feel alone. For the first time in her small life, she found something the world had told her to fear, and instead, she loved it. When she finally stood to leave, the hatchling let out a soft cry, wings flapping in protest. She turned back, smiling wide. "Don't worry, I'll come back tomorrow. Promise." She patted its snout before skipping away, as though she had merely befriended a puppy. Behind her, the dragon hatchling watched until she disappeared into the trees, a warmth lingering in its chest. It did not yet know the meaning of the bond that had been forged, nor could she understand the danger such a friendship would invite. But in that clearing, on that ordinary morning, something extraordinary had begun, a thread of trust between two unlikely souls, tied not by fear, but by the innocent word of a child, cute. The little girl kept her promise. The very next morning, before the village roosters had crowed twice, she snuck away with a basket clutched tightly in her arms. Inside were scraps of bread, a bruised apple, and half a wedge of cheese she had slyly pocketed when her mother wasn't looking. Her heart raced, not from fear of the woods, but from excitement. The memory of the strange little creature with its clumsy wings and glowing eyes filled her with joy she could not explain. The forest seemed less frightening this time. Each step along the dirt path was lit by the anticipation of seeing her new friend. And there it was, waiting in the same clearing, as though it had been holding its breath for her return. The hatchling perked up the moment it caught her scent, wings fluttering, tail thumping the earth like a drumbeat of delight. "You missed me, didn't you?" she said, her small voice carrying laughter. She set the basket down, breaking off pieces of bread to offer. The hatchling lunged too eagerly, its teeth scraping her fingers. She yelped, but only giggled afterward, wagging her finger playfully. "Careful, silly. You're not scary at all. You're just hungry." The dragon chewed noisily, crumbs spraying, before sneezing sparks again. This time, one landed on the hem of her dress, leaving a tiny scorch mark. She patted it out quickly, then burst into more giggles. To her, it was the funniest thing in the world. To the hatchling, her laughter was strange but comforting, a sound that did not carry threat. It chirped, an oddly bird-like sound, and pressed its snout against her lap. So began their routine. Day after day, she slipped into the woods to bring offerings. Fruit cores, bits of cooked meat, even a stolen honey bun once, though she nearly got caught for that. Each visit, their bond deepened. She named the hatchling Ember, after the way sparks crackled from its nostrils when it sneezed. Ember learned to recognize her footsteps, to lower its head so she could stroke the rough scales of its snout. It even tried to mimic her laughter once, producing a rasping croak that startled them both before it dissolved into her delighted clapping. To her, Ember was not the monster from villagers' fireside stories. He was awkward, needy, sometimes clumsy, like any baby. When he tripped over his oversized tail, she helped him up. When he flapped his stunted wings and collapsed in a heap, she encouraged him with, "You'll fly one day, I know it." She drew stick figures in the dirt, explaining them as me and you, though Ember only pawed at them curiously. Innocence blinded her to danger, or perhaps it revealed a truth adults refused to see, where they saw only terror in dragonkind. She saw a creature that laughed badly, sneezed fire, and wanted nothing more than companionship. But the world beyond the clearing was not blind. The villagers had begun to whisper. Farmers discovered patches of scorched grass on their grazing fields. A shepherd claimed he heard strange cries in the night, neither bird nor beast. Chickens had gone missing from pens, their remains found singed at the edges. Fear spread like fire through dry hay. The elders muttered about omens, about how dragons never strayed so close unless they planned destruction. The little girl, though, knew the truth. Each time she saw Ember's smoke sneezes and his clumsy attempts at catching squirrels, she realized what the villagers had mistaken for menace. But how could she explain that the awful dragon they feared was just a baby who had once burned his own tail trying to light a pile of leaves? She imagined telling them he's cute and laughed softly at the absurdity. No one would believe her, so she kept their friendship secret. At night, while her parents spoke grimly by the fire, she hugged her knees and bit her lip to keep from blurting out the truth. By day, when other children dared one another to peek into the woods, she kept silent, protecting her secret like a treasure too precious to share. Her small heart carried a burden too big for her age. She wanted to show Ember to the world, to parade him through the village like a prized puppy. But she also knew that if the villagers discovered him, they would raise their pitchforks and spears. The thought made her chest tighten until she could barely breathe. One afternoon, after feeding Ember a cluster of berries, she lay back on the grass and stared at the sky. The hatchling sprawled beside her, belly full, smoke curling gently from its nostrils as it dozed. She traced shapes in the clouds with her finger. "That one looks like a bunny," she murmured. "And that one, that's a dragon, but not scary like the ones in stories." "That's you." Ember cracked one eye open and blinked lazily. She reached out, patting his warm scales. "You're not awful at all. You're my friend." The dragon exhaled softly, and for a fleeting moment, she felt the world was perfect, just her little girl and her secret companion. But perfection never lasts. Over the weeks, Ember grew, not by much, but enough that the change was noticeable. His wings stretched farther, his sparks flared hotter, and his appetite increased beyond what scraps she could sneak from home. He began to wander from the clearing, sniffing curiously at new scents. Once, he returned with feathers stuck to his mouth, and though she scolded him gently, she feared what would happen if the villagers traced it back to him. The whispers in town grew louder. Men spoke of sharpening weapons. Mothers pulled their children indoors after dusk. Some claimed they had seen glowing eyes in the woods. The elders muttered that the age of calamities was returning. The girl listened in silence, clutching her spoon at the dinner table, heart pounding with every rumor. She knew the day would come when someone else saw Ember, and when that happened, her secret would no longer be hers alone. Still, she could not stop herself from visiting. Even when her mother warned, "Stay close, little sparrow. Bad things stir in the woods," she slipped away at the first chance. Ember needed her. He would be lonely without her. And, truthfully, she would be lonely without him. That day, when she arrived, Ember bounded toward her with such force that she tumbled backward into grass, laughing as he licked her cheek with surprisingly rough tongue. She wrapped her arms around his neck, ignoring the scales that scraped her skin. "No matter what they say," she whispered into the warm crook of his neck, "I won't let anyone hurt you." The dragon, though it did not understand her words, pressed closer, as if it believed her. In that clearing, shielded from the fears of the world, a friendship flourished that should never have been possible. A 6-year-old girl and an awful dragon hatchling, together against everything. For weeks, the girl had lived 2 lives. In one, she was the ordinary little sparrow of the village, helping her mother sweep the floor, fetching water from the well, listening quietly as grown-ups muttered of danger. In the other, she was the guardian of a secret, the companion of Ember, the awful hatchling who, in her eyes, was only clumsy and cute. But secrets, like smoke, cannot stay hidden forever. It began on a morning heavy with unease. A shepherd stumbled into the square, his face pale, clutching a half-burnt lamb carcass. His words tumbled out between gasps. "Dragon! I swear it, in the woods." The villagers crowded around, their fears finally confirmed. Fear became fury. "First the chickens, now livestock," one farmer shouted. "We must strike before it grows strong," barked another. "The old days are returning," muttered an elder, shaking his head. The little girl sat on the edge of the gathering, her tiny hands tightening around the hem of her dress. Her heart thudded painfully. She knew Ember had wandered more often, his hunger too big for a basket of scraps. But she couldn't tell them that the guilty one was her friend, her Ember, without signing his death sentence. By evening, the decision was made. The men would hunt at dawn. Spears were sharpened, arrows fletched, nets mended. Mothers whispered fearful prayers. Children peeked from behind skirts. The air smelled of pitch and iron. Preparation for war. That night, the girl couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, staring at the dark line of the forest, tears burning her eyes. If they found Ember, no, she wouldn't let them. At dawn, while the village still stirred with drowsy movement, she ran. Barefoot, clutching a crust of bread, she darted down the familiar path into the trees. Her breath came fast, her chest tight, but her determination carried her. Ember was waiting, as always. His tail thumped when he saw her, his eyes brightening. But when she threw her arms around his neck, she did not laugh this time. She whispered urgently into his scales, "They're coming! You have to hide. Please, Ember, you can't be seen." The hatchling tilted its head, confused. He nuzzled her, sensing her fear but not understanding. "Promise me," she begged, holding his snout between her tiny hands. "Stay hidden. Don't follow me." But Ember was still just a baby, and babies rarely listened. The hunters entered the forest in a line, boots heavy, voices grim. The girl crept behind them, heart hammering. She wanted to see where they searched to make sure Ember was safe. But she hadn't gone far when the inevitable happened. A rustle, a snap of twigs, a flash of scales between trees. Ember had followed her. "Dragon!" a voice roared. Chaos exploded. Spears lifted, bows drew taut. Shouts filled the air as men spread into a circle, eyes wide with terror. Ember froze, startled by the sudden clamor. Smoke puffed nervously from his nostrils. "No!" The girl burst from the bushes, throwing herself between the hunters and her hatchling. "Stop! He won't hurt you." "Move aside, child!" one man barked, his spear aimed. "That thing will kill us all." "He's just a baby!" she cried, arms spread wide. Tears blurred her eyes, but she stood firm. "He's mine. Don't hurt him." The hunters hesitated, not out of mercy for the dragon, but out of shock that a 6-year-old girl shielded it with her tiny body. Their voices clashed. "She's bewitched. It'll roast her alive. Pull her away." Ember, frightened by the shouting, released a screech. Instinct flared, his throat glowed, and a small burst of fire shot skyward, scorching the branches above. Panic erupted. The hunters cursed, stumbling back. To them, the flames were proof. "Monster, strike it down." The girl sobbed, clutching Ember's neck. "No, he didn't mean to. He's scared." The first spear flew. It whistled past her shoulder, grazing Ember's wing. The hatchling shrieked, stumbling back, his tail lashing in pain. He might have retaliated then, might have unleashed fire in blind terror. But the girl pressed her face against the scales, her small hands gripping him tight. "Don't, Ember. Please don't." And he didn't. He trembled, smoke curling weakly from his mouth. But he didn't lash out. Instead, he curled protectively around her, his body forming a barrier, his glowing eyes fixed on the hunters. That sight gave even hardened men pause. This was no beast tearing through villages. It was a frightened creature shielding a child. Still, fear is a stubborn poison. "Step aside, girl," the leader barked, though his voice cracked with uncertainty. "It's a dragon. It'll grow. It'll destroy us all." The girl lifted her tear-streaked face, her voice trembling but fierce. "He's my friend. He's not awful. He's cute. He's good." Her words rang into the silence. The hunters shifted uneasily, their spears wavering. Some looked at Ember's trembling frame, at the way his wings drooped and his claws dug nervously into the earth. Others looked only at the spark still glowing faintly in his throat, imagining what he might become. The standoff stretched, fragile as glass. Finally, an elder stepped forward. His beard was long, his eyes tired with years. He raised a hand, and the hunters lowered their weapons slightly. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "it is not as the old tales taught us. Perhaps dragons are not born monsters, but made so by fear." Murmurs rippled. Some nodded, uneasy but swayed. Others scowled, unwilling to yield. The girl clung tighter to Ember, her small chest heaving. She knew this moment was everything. If she failed, they would kill him. If she succeeded, maybe, just maybe, he would be spared. But mercy is never unanimous. A younger hunter snarled, snatching an arrow from his quiver. "Old fool, will you gamble all our lives on a beast? It's tricking us." He raised his bow, aiming straight for Ember's eye. The girl screamed, but before she could move, Ember acted, not with fire, but with instinctive loyalty. He lunged, curling around her tighter, taking the arrow in his shoulder. His cry of pain tore through the clearing, a sound so raw it silenced even the angriest voices. Blood darkened his scales. The girl's tears fell onto his wound as she sobbed. "No! Please, stop hurting him." For the first time, the hunters truly saw, not a monster, but a creature willing to bleed to protect a child. And in that realization, fear cracked. The forest held its breath. Weapons wavered. Some men lowered their spears entirely. Ember trembled, but he did not attack. He only shielded the girl, his body hunched in pain, his amber eyes dim but resolute. The girl buried her face in his neck, whispering through her tears, "I won't let them take you. I won't." And in that moment, in the space between fear and compassion, the fate of their friendship teetered like a scale that had yet to tip. The clearing was still. Smoke drifted lazily from broken branches, where Ember's frightened burst of flame had scorched the canopy. The hunters stood frozen, their spears trembling in their grips. The girl knelt in the grass, sobbing, her small hands pressing against the blood welling from Ember's shoulder. The hatchling whimpered softly, curling tighter around her, as if she were the one in need of protection. For the first time, the villagers saw the dragon not as a monster, but as a child, just like her. The elder's voice broke the silence. "Put down your weapons," he said, firm but gentle. "If it wished us dead, we would already be ash. But see how it bleeds, how it trembles. See how it guards the little one." Some hunters obeyed, lowering their spears uncertainly. Others gritted their teeth, unwilling to let go of old fears. "It's a trick," one spat. "All beasts play weak before they strike." "No beast takes an arrow for a child," the elder replied. The girl lifted her tear-streaked face, her voice raw. "He's not awful. He's mine, my friend. He's cute." Her words, simple as they were, carried weight sharper than any blade. Her sobs were not lies. Her tiny body, pressed against the dragon's side, was not trickery. Her innocence stripped away the cloak of fear that had blinded them. The leader of the hunters stepped forward, his jaw tight. He looked at Ember's wound, at the way the dragon's tail curled protectively around the girl. His hand tightened on his spear, and then, with a heavy sigh, he lowered it. "I will not strike a beast that shields a child," he muttered. Relief rippled through the clearing, though not all agreed. The younger hunter who had loosed the arrow snarled, furious. "Fools, all of you. Spare it now, and it will grow to burn our homes. Do you not remember the old tales?" The elder's gaze was steady. "Perhaps the old tales are wrong." The girl turned back to Ember, stroking his scales. Her small fingers trembled as she whispered, "You'll be okay. I'll take care of you. I promise." Ember blinked slowly, eyes heavy with pain yet softened with trust. He pressed his snout against her cheek, as if to say he believed her. The villagers watched in silence. Some felt shame for their fear, others awed her courage. What they could not deny was the truth laid bare before them. A child's love had tamed a creature they had sworn was untamable. Word spread quickly. By dusk, the entire village gathered in the square. The girl stood before them, her small hand resting on Ember's snout. He sat behind her, wings folded, his injured shoulder bound with cloth that one reluctant healer had provided after much persuasion. The crowd buzzed with arguments. It's madness to let it live. Did you not see how it shielded her? It will bring ruin. It might bring peace. The village elder raised his hand, calling for silence. We have lived in fear of dragon for generations, but fear alone has blinded us. Look at this child. Look at her companion. Does this seem like the monster of our nightmares? Ember gave a small, almost pitiful chirp, tilting his head against the girl's shoulder. The crowd stirred. It was not a roar, not a threat, but a sound like a bird calling for comfort. The girl took a deep breath, her voice high but steady. He's my best friend. He's not scary, not mean. He's just a baby. He needs me, and I need him. Please don't take him away. Her words, spoken with all the earnestness of a 6-year-old, pierced deeper than reasoned arguments ever could. Mothers clutched their own children tighter, imagining them in her place. Fathers looked at the dragon and saw not fangs, but loyalty. The decision was not unanimous. Some stormed away, muttering curses. Others remained uneasy. But enough hearts had softened that no order of execution came that night. From then on, Ember was not entirely welcomed, but neither was he hunted. He lived at the edge of the forest, where the girl visited daily. Some villagers watched from afar, wary, but gradually they saw that the hatchling never strayed near their homes, never attacked, never brought harm. When the girl laughed with him, their laughter echoed, and it was hard to call such sounds monstrous. The girl brought him food openly now, with her mother's reluctant knowledge. Sometimes other children followed, daring at first, then curious. They watched Ember flap his wings clumsily, sneeze sparks, and trip over his tail. Laughter spread. Fear began to fade. Even so, not all was peace. Whispers of danger lingered, warnings that one day he would outgrow their kindness. But for now, the girl's innocence had carved a fragile truce. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of fire, the girl sat on a grassy hill beside Ember. His wound had healed, though a scar remained on his scales. She leaned against his warm side, tiny compared to his growing frame. "You're not awful," she said softly, her eyes shining. "You're wonderful. One day they'll all see it too." Ember rumbled in his chest, a sound like distant thunder, but gentle. He lowered his head so she could pat it, and together they watched the first stars bloom in the twilight. In that moment, the world was not divided by human and dragon, fear and hatred, prey and predator. It was just a girl and her friend, bound not by blood or destiny, but by something stronger, innocence, trust, and love. And so, the story of the awful dragon hatchling who was called cute by a little girl became something whispered differently among the villagers, not as a tale of fear, but as a lesson that sometimes it takes the untainted heart of a child to see the truth others cannot. The girl did not know if Ember would grow into a beast of legend or a companion of peace. She did not know what dangers the future held, but she knew this. Whatever came, they would face it together, hand in claw. Innocence against fear, a friendship that should never have existed, yet did.